I think Jonathan is a very different person. He's a real transformational leader. If I think of a transformational leader, I think as a role model, someone that I respect and I can look up to for guidance. I think it's not too difficult to internalize the values and the goals of such a person. And that in itself is what makes us change agents at the institution, because Jonathan is such an inspiring leader, and with his vision, he make it easy for us to follow and assist in the transformation process.
He takes himself off of his pedestal of being Vice-Chancellor of the university and say, listen, I'm just a teacher. We're all in this together, building a better South Africa.
Because of his openness, he has a way of getting to every corner. It is helping the whole community to actually start operating that way, caring about people. People are scared of universities, but with Jonathan, he will make you feel like university, it's your kitchen.
It really is about love as opposed to regulatory and administrative and managerial kinds of stuff, which are necessary, but are really, for me, secondary to the heart of the leader in a difficult place.
Where are you from? Hey! From Lesotho. And what year of study are you?
Honors.
Honors? You too young for honors, man.
Well, thank you, sir.
Good luck.
Yes, thank you.
What area?
Investment management.
Nice.
Yes, sir.
Sort of shadow of this beautiful. I've got a very simple approach to leadership, and that is you identify the 2 or 3 things you want to do, and and once you're convinced this is the right thing, you move with all your time, resources, energy, and you make it happen. So I invest quite heavily in a few projects that I think are strategic to turning around the university, both on the human side and then my other ambition, as you know, on the academic side. So increase the academic standard, create greater equity in the system, refuse the trade-off between equity and excellence, and move the system.
His vision now, almost everybody shares it, because it's not complicated. It's very straightforward, is that you must care about another person and make a plan to help another person. It's about the human project, it's about the academic project.
The rates incident was a terrible trauma for the university, in that what was already an underlying black-white tension in every social sphere at the university, the student churches, the residences, the classrooms, the open spaces, and so on, came to a head, with this terrible attack.
People kept on saying, this is our university, and it would be mostly white Africans. And therefore, the black students and the black academics that came to the university, starting from 1993, felt lost every time. It's like you are visiting somebody's house, and therefore you have to watch what you do and watch what you say.
White youth in general, I think they say, but we weren't part of apartheid. We didn't do anything. And that's true. We didn't do anything. We can't do anything about what happened. We didn't have an impact. But we are sitting with the consequences. We are sitting with something that needs to be restored, that needs to be healed.
We focus and use the opportunity, to really focus on the institution as a place that needed to transform deeply in terms of what we now call the human project, our human understandings of each other and ourselves. And in that process, I was happy to go along with revisiting, as a leader, my own assumptions about good and bad, about past and future, and about our As one Indian professor visiting South Africa recently put it, understanding our entanglements, which I thought was a very beautiful word.
In his inaugural speech, I'll never forget it, addressing the rates issue. He was so powerful and so humble at the same time. He said, I'm forgiven, therefore I forgive. Life-changing. Life-changing. The content of human and academic transformation that Jonathan lives. It's totally new in South Africa because transformation became a political concept. And he lived it as something very existential, very human, that really created an atmosphere in which one can be oneself. And that means, for me, coming to terms with my own history.
University of the Free State, as we all know, is an old university, but we have a lot of the same. All white, Afrikaners, mainly male-dominated. Since Jonathan arrived, one of the most important things that have been transformed at the institution is the academic diversity and the academic intellectual transformation. I think Jonathan is at heart a teacher, and because he's a teacher, he's also a mentor. He likes to work with people at an individual basis, and that's part of transformation. For example, since his arrival, we established the world-class postgraduate school. Part of the postgraduate school, the Prestige Scholars Program, where 25 young promising academics were elected at the institution, and they are being mentored to become the next generation of the professoriate at the University of the Free State. Jonathan himself spent significant time with these prestige scholars to assist them through a mentoring process in career advancement.
I must be honest, an unbelievable joy out of seeing people develop, find their talent, find their space. I still think the biggest problem, we underestimate the capacity of our people. I'm telling you now, we underestimate the capacity we have for greatness as a country, because I have seen it.
Many people say that international education liberates us. Jonathan have arranged for all these 25 young scholars to get a placement of 6 months at leading world-class universities abroad, to get that international exposure, the diversity of thought, and bring that back to the institution here. So it's not only growing our own timber from within, it's also addressing academic diversity by bringing in the 25 senior research professors. So it's from both sides, from within and from without, because the one have a shorter term impact and the other one have a longer term impact, that he has tackled by the horns and said, this is how we're going to transform this institution intellectually.
I discovered a few years ago that there was an incredible sensitivity around talking about the past among ordinary South Africans.
Well, today we've got a very, very interesting and difficult subject, still in the context of how should we deal with that past. Should we just forget it? That would be nice. But we don't forget things, they keep coming back.
When we designed the course, I said one of the 7 big questions, intellectual questions we have to pose is how do we deal with our violent past? And so the goal of the class really is not to, dredge up all the bad things that make white people look terrible, but to in fact say, the past is present. You cannot understand where we are without understanding how we got here. And therefore, here's a set of skills for dealing with the past in a way that leads to a different kind of future than the one you imagine.
Now, the questions that you
The teaching experience of my life was when I taught the module in UFS 101 on Did God Really Say? It is actually a question that Jonathan asked. Did God really say? If you know the history of our country, God was misused so many times. So in deconstructing that argument, helping students to understand it, in the land that I came from, where lives were stolen, when I looked at the young people in front of me, the white youngsters were sitting that side, most of the blacks were sitting here, and I opened a perspective on South Africa in which I grew up, in which God spoke. To call yourself into question is difficult. And you should not, to my mind, use concepts of forgiveness. Not for that. It's deep existential awarenesses, experiences that is embodied in words like, I offer my pardon. So I offered my pardon for the legacy which I left. And I could see that they've never heard something like this. And then something totally unforeseen happened. A young black student jumped up and hugged me. That also changed my life. I was so isolated in theology. Suddenly, horizons broadened. Students greet me, and I know that somewhere they were in the UFS 101 class, and reconciliation. It's not a concept, it's a way of living. And what happened at this university, it wouldn't have happened in any other university, I know that.
What I'm trying to ask you, my students, to do, think logically, think historically, think compassionately, think of human being, think of the past, because the past is present.
We lived on a corner house, which was probably one of the most dangerous places in Cape Town, because on that corner house came all of humanity. But in a wonderful way, you were sheltered from it. You saw it, and you were sheltered. And the sheltering was that core set of values that my parents shared with us as children. It's the dignity of work. It's the sanctity of life. It's the honoring of your brother and sister, irrespective of what they look like. So even in the midst of the most appalling racism of the Western Cape, white people from the church came through our home, black people came through our home, everybody came through our home, and everybody was treated equally.
There is no forced hierarchical approach to getting to him. There are days when anyone can see him without an appointment.
Wow, asseblief. En wat was die deurslaggewende?
You'll get a call later today.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your initiative. I really appreciate it. The one thing I'm convinced about is about the love and the direction. Love to me is so fundamental to drawing out evocatively positive and productive relationships. And so once the love was expressed and hopefully demonstrated, there also had to be a strong sense of direction. You cannot swear at somebody or deny somebody because they're gay or black or woman and so on. And on that, I'm fairly tough. On that, on disrespecting learning, I'm fairly tough. But the problem is you can't be tough unless you've shown love first. This is very fundamental to whether you're teaching and leading young people or whether you, at home with your own children. There must be a sense that this person will walk through fire for me. Whether it's staff or students, they must sense that. this person will go all out for me. Once you've demonstrated that, it is easier to then say, but I don't think this is appropriate behavior, and I'd like you to stop.
Good. And how are you? Why are you going home so early? Work is out. What are you guys studying?
Media.
Media. Psychology.
I'm not naive about the fact that you will have extreme cases in which you have to act outside of the frame you're more comfortable with, which is that frame of persuasion through compassion and direction through leadership.
I was the prime of my residence in my third year, which was a historically white residence. And I think when Prof. Jansen came, he just has that amazing balance between the personal aspect that he cultivates an understanding within himself of what these resident students go through, what it contributes to their lives. He acknowledges that. I mean, a lot of his research previously has gone into just understanding the way students think. After my year as prime, I realized I can't just leave now. That realization came after conversation with Prof. Jansen.
There was a lot of angry white and black students around the table who were leaders in different residences. They said to me, we think we know what you want to do here. We understand it, okay? But you're driving it too hard, okay? We are at the coalface, I'm paraphrasing, okay? We have to deal with these right-wing students and we have to deal with the very progressive left-wing students. We think we know what we're doing, said the student leaders, and we think we can do it.
In the end, he said, you know what we want, go and do it.
There was something in the pathos of the expression that I said to myself, you're going to take this risk and you've got to say it. And I said to them, and I said to Nida in particular, now the Afrikaans word is much more powerful than the English word. It's vertrou. Ek vertrou julle, which is a very deep meaning in Afrikaans.
When he told us he trusted us, he went with a personal thing. It wasn't a professional, we can't budge on this. So he appealed to that heart that we were showing. He showed heart. And I mean, you're so thankful when you see it because it's this new thing almost that you had the Vice Chancellor of a university look at you literally with tears in his eyes. It's almost coming out in a whisper, like I've never experienced something like it. This older man, and he's just speaking very, very softly, and he's got tears in his eyes.
Boy, was that the right decision. At the time, I must confess, I went home to sleep. I said, this thing can go either way because I'm now giving them the project of residence integration. Beyond numbers.
I then decided to move into one of the historically black residences, and I think from there I could also firsthand experience what are the differences between us, where are we the same, and I think that is also a key element in this whole reconciliation process, is that if white and black people realize, but we are different, and it's good, it's not bad, difference and diversity is good, but as people, we are more alike than we are different.
How are the studies going?
Very well, thank you.
What do you mean so-so?
I don't tell people what to do. That's not my first instinct. My first instinct is to model a way of doing things. The way I lead meetings, the way one, treats students and staff. The fact that I teach first-year students, it's partly because I love teaching, but it's partly to sort of say this is not beneath you as a professor to go and teach, freshman students. I mean, so, and again, it's not calculating. I don't want to give the impression that I sit there and say, I must do this and all to that. I just do it, and it has a wonderful way of rubbing off on people.
No, I know that. I mean, I know the facts, but Choice's point is the perception.
I sort of now know from, especially our country, that you never ever respond to the surface features of a problem. So my first response is normally cerebral. Okay, a tragedy happened in a residence. I'd call the team together and I say, what did you hear? What are the facts? Did you get a report on this? Can we talk to that? because I've made mistakes so often in the past. You hear something and you immediately want to judge, you want to take sides, and then you realize that complexity and complicity are often part of this very turbulent country. The second thing is an enormous sense, especially when people get hurt, an enormous sense of sadness, an enormous sense of how could they do that, to the young woman, or how could they do that to the member of staff. And I think it is somewhere in the alchemy of the head and the heart that I work out the response. I always look instinctively, as I think, for restoration, even with horrible things, because I believe very deeply that creates the space for honesty and for wholeness and for resolution that you don't get in a straight accusatory, tone in the way you address problems. Now, I'm also very clear that you've got to name the wrong. This is not in place of. But when you do it and how you do it and through what medium you do it is almost as important to me as anything else. Archbishop Tutu, at the time, Bishop Tutu as he was then, set up this scholarship for Black South Africans to study in the US, and I was one of the first groups. You end up in another culture, in another context, in another environment, and you come back completely trained, simply because of the broader exposures.
I remember when I was going overseas, I called home and I told them, and they asked me, are there any white people in your group? And that was like, okay, yeah, well, there are white people in my group, okay, fine. And I could feel that the people at home weren't that comfortable with it. I'm black and they're white, how can you guys live together? Aren't these people gonna treat you badly? So I'm just saying the gap that we're feeling, we are still fighting with the past.
By the time they come back, they are challenged, they're changed, and I've seen the greatest friendships that I've ever seen.
I am a relationships guy, okay? If you think about it, the whole life is about relationships, okay? How do you influence people? Through relationships. So if you can build a relationship with someone else, just get their perspective, see the other side, then you can actually have change. And that's what I realized. That's what worked for me. That's, I don't know, it was for me die groot bang.
The whole goal was that if you could do that with the 70 other things that the Dean of Students and his teams were doing, to bring students into communion with 101, with the open door policy, that the combined effects would be to create a more human campus.
The university and the leadership of the university go to a lot of effort to create platforms where people can actually speak openly, and I think that helps a lot to understanding and accepting and appreciating other people and their differences, because if you expose yourself to such platforms, you learn to be a critical thinker and to be an open-minded person. You're able to put yourself in someone else's shoes where you can entertain another person's perspective and another person's thoughts without necessarily accepting them as your own.
I want to say to the Department of Architecture, you make us incredibly proud. And one of the reasons I think people do the work that architects like you do is to try and reimagine the space.
His approach is to stir, to force people to reconsider, to create a new environment of engagement and debate.
Can we create spaces like this on campus that brings our staff and students into communion without making a fuss about it, so that the space doesn't only physically accommodate people, but socially, culturally, aesthetically, politically as well? Is that possible? Hannes, praat met my.
He disarms the critics, or he makes them even more excited. But disarming is so important because it's a new way. It's different. It is unusual. Inciting more criticism I think, is an important component for an inspirational, leading by example, extraordinary leader like Jonathan.
It is not nice to hear you being called all kinds of things. On the one hand, from the very right of the political spectrum, by people who think you are the actual black person they sent here to finally bury the Afrikaner ideals, or from black folk, comrades and so on, who believe that you're not really black. Now you must understand how painful that is. But overriding those feelings is something fundamental to my upbringing. And that was that if you believed that what you were doing was the right thing, you absolutely do not deviate.
There's obviously challenges. In many cases, people are unhappy, some people are leaving. But generally speaking, I think that 80% of the people at the institution who were here when he came today is full behind him and moving in the direction of a transformed 21st century university, which will be a world-class university recognized for academic excellence.
I absolutely want opposition. I would often say, like yesterday in my meeting, a senior meeting, I said, please fight with me. Give me the counter case. Give me the argument for the other side so that I can then with you evaluate another strategy. That is very important to me. The less opposition in that sense, the worse the decision might be. So in my teaching and in my leading, it is fundamental to, in fact, testing the validity of your standpoint.
Hey, how are you? Have a great day.
I am so conscious of the fact that I might fail. I'm not fearful of it because I'm made peace with my brokenness, but I'm conscious of the fact that if these students see that my friends are only black, which of course has not been the case, but if they saw a kind of behavior that was opposite to what we were telling them to do, I would lose their trust and I would lose their commitment. And so with my team, I all the time have to talk about the very high standard we set for ourselves as leaders. Now, in talking about leadership, as you know, whether it's on campus or in the country, I always make the point, whether it's Nelson Mandela or little people like us here, it cannot be a perfect leadership, but it's got to be an honest leadership about what we can do and what we can't.